So for the first time since the end of apartheid, the ANC is facing a major shift. Last month's elections saw the vote share drop to just over 40%, a significant fall from the 57% that the party held in 2019, with the political landscape more fragmented than ever. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa has stressed the need for an extraordinary leadership during this period of fundamental consequence. Joining us now to discuss this further is the German ambassador, Andreas Peschke, on why the ANC might be pushing for a government of national unity and whether it will be sustainable for the future. Ambassador, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Before we speak about the conversations that are currently underway, what do you make of how the ANC has dealt with this particular matter, and also the NEC of the ANC saying let's go the government of national unity route instead of a coalition government in the traditional sense of a coalition government, where you find just a few political parties coming together to form that coalition? Instead, here what the president has done is to open it up to all political parties that are represented in parliament.
Well, very good morning to you as well. Thanks for having me. On your question, I think I find it quite natural what is currently happening in the political spectrum. After all, it's historic that the ANC for the first time for 30 years has lost its outright majority in parliament. So I think would find it quite natural that this party now is looking for a broad majority in order to form a governing arrangement, a governing cooperation, or a coalition government. I think in times when the country faces enormous challenges, like how to kickstart the economy, how to fight unemployment, how to tackle load shedding or load reduction, I would think it's probably a wise way to go to look for broad majorities in order to tackle these enormous challenges. And I think it happens all over the world. I think in Germany, whenever the challenges are particularly big, we tended to have a grand coalition also from political forces from the right and the left spectrum, left side of the political spectrum. And if you look at the European election that happened yesterday and the day before yesterday in the EU, we are also going to have quite a fragmented political spectrum. And I think what's going to happen probably, the final results still pending, is that the main factions will also look for a broad majority, a broad coalition in the European Parliament as well. So I think looking for broad majorities is quite natural in this situation.
Yeah, I guess the other thing with us that is different to the German model is that for our lawmakers currently, there is no threshold in terms of the number of votes that the political party would need to acquire, in terms of the percentage that is. Right now, we're only focusing on the number of the specific votes, and based on that specific votes, then we get to determine how many parties will be securing seats in parliament, whereas with the German model, there is also the threshold. And with our model, it has now given us 18 political parties to have negotiations with, whereas in Germany, I think it was about 6 political parties.
Well, that's a good point. I think we have quite a significant threshold of 5%. Maybe that is something that needs to be tackled structurally or thought about structurally in South Africa. But I think that is beyond the work of forming a government now, whether to introduce a threshold into the electoral law. In Germany, actually, we have had a threshold for the national election. We didn't have a threshold for the European election, which means that we are going to send quite a number of various political parties to the European Parliament. But we are going to reintroduce a threshold there as well, so that may be useful. And then maybe one more thing. I mean, time is very short within the timeline of 2 weeks to until the election of the president.
Yeah.
But what I think is necessary, from our perspective at least, is to really try to whatever is going to be the arrangement to cooperate to govern this country, really to fix the arrangement in writing and to make this agreement, or whatever it is, to make this agreement transparent to the public as well, so that the public can really measure politicians and those who are going to govern the country against what they have agreed upon and what they have promised. That's number one. And number two, I think it's probably going to be a complicated arrangement, which is also probably going to meet some hiccups as we go. So I think it would be advisable, and again, this is speaking from the German experience, to really install some kind of permanent mechanism of conflict resolution, apart from, usual government meetings, sittings of the parliament and so on, where political leaders that form that governing corporation, or coalition, or government of national unity sit regularly together and hammer out whatever the problems come up, whatever the differences are, because otherwise such a government of unity might run into quite practical problems of different opinions.
Yeah. The president has just issued his weekly letter, and at the end of that weekly letter, he says that as a country prepares for a new democratic administration, all parties need to work together to sustain the momentum of reform, growth and transformation. But I wonder, for a country like Germany, how do you view what's currently happening? For instance, now you've said that time is running out, and we've been speaking about this as well. It's quite a tight deadline that the political parties are faced with to try and form a government. But are there any jitters in the German corridors at all around what's currently happening in South Africa?
Well, to be quite frank, as friends and partners of this country, close partners of this country with a strong relationship, we are watching very closely. I understand that, in South Africa, people, of course, think about themselves and how they're going to solve the problems and the challenges of this country. But the world is watching. That far I can say. So, the German business is watching. The German political actors are also watching, because I think South Africa is an important country on the African continent. It is an important partner economically, with lots of international and German businesses here in the country. We also have South African investments in Germany, and South Africa is a very important partner in the international arena as well. So I think, we would need a strong South African government also after the new government is going to be formed, and we are looking forward to close cooperation. So we are watching closely, and frankly, we pray and we hope for the best.
Hope for the best. You touched a bit on the European parliamentary elections over the weekend as well. And my colleague was asking about what this means, the outcomes of it for geopolitics. And we also see that, well, at least the centre, the Liberals, as well as the Socialist parties have been able to retain the majority of the seats, however, though it is at a reduced majority. But what does this then mean for geopolitics as well, and how we understand the European Union in a broader context?
Yeah, well, we are still struggling to understand what has happened during the European election over the weekend. It seems that the far right has gathered strength in many countries in Europe, including in Germany. I think they took the relative majority in France and in other countries as well. So, but on the other hand, as you have said, the center also seems to hold. So with the Christian, or the conservatives, the Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats, the Liberals and the Greens. So they will have if they work together, they can form a broad-based majority in the European Parliament. And I think that would mean a lot of continuity in EU politics geopolitically, also vis-à-vis the African continent. I mean, we have been working on important topics between the EU and Africa, between the EU and South Africa. We want to organize the EU-South African Summit. I think continuity would be good news as in this geopolitical situation, but our parties now would need to work very hard as well in order to form a functioning majority in the European Parliament.
Yeah, and finally, Ambassador, so in terms of the stability then of Europe as a whole, considering now you have Emmanuel Macron, who has called for a snap election, even before this parliamentary election, the European parliamentary election, you've had the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also bringing the elections forward. What does this all then mean for the stability of Europe?
Well, the snap election in France, in a way, came to a surprise, as a surprise to many. Also, the fact that it's going to happen very soon, I think it was a reaction to the yesterday's result at the European election. On the other hand, elections are a natural thing in the democratic process. So we are going to have, it's actually regular elections in the United Kingdom. We're going to have parliamentary elections now in France. We are going to have important regional elections in Germany in September. We are going to have a national election in Austria. So, and I think in all these elections, the democratic forces, the centrist democratic forces, will have to struggle hard in order to secure centrist democratic majorities, because in times of challenges, the political challenges to the center everywhere is quite enormous. So I think our social democrats, our liberal democrats, our Christian democrats, I think they would have to work very hard in order to ensure functioning majorities. It's not going to be easy, but we believe it still can be done.
Yeah. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. Let's see what the impact of the outcomes of that parliamentary vote will have on global geopolitics, and also the elections coming up now in France as well as the United Kingdom. Andreas Peschke, there is the German ambassador to South Africa, speaking to us about the government of national unity that the ANC is trying to establish here back at home.